Before Dolores Cannon died, one message kept appearing in her work, and most people may have missed its real meaning. She warned that people could become so focused on signs, predictions, and outside answers that they lose touch with themselves. But when you connect that idea with her teachings about fear and humanity's shift, something surprising appears. Maybe the real change was never supposed to begin around us. Maybe it had to begin inside us first. Stay until the end, because the final message makes this deeply personal. To understand why this message matters, you have to understand what Dolores Cannon spent decades searching for. Her work moved far beyond ordinary hypnosis. She explored reincarnation, consciousness, what might exist between lives, and the possibility that human identity is much larger than the person we see in the mirror. Within her spiritual framework, hypnosis became a doorway into questions almost everyone has asked at some point. What happens when we die? Why are we here? Is consciousness limited to the body? And could there be something inside us that remembers more than our waking mind does? That is why people drawn to Cannon's work often expect something enormous, a prediction, a coming event, a hidden change in humanity, some final piece of information that explains where everything is heading. But there is a strange problem with constantly searching for one more answer. Eventually, the search itself can become the thing keeping you from changing. At the heart of Cannon's QHHT system was the belief that beneath ordinary thought exists a deeper level of awareness. She often called it the subconscious, while similar ideas are described as the higher self, the soul, or the oversoul within that spiritual framework. The important idea is simple. The deeper wisdom is not supposed to be somewhere far away. It is already beneath the noise. And that creates a paradox. If the answer is supposed to exist within you, why do you keep searching outside yourself? Another teacher, another prediction, another sign, another reading, another video telling you what is coming next. At first, that feels like growth. You learn more about consciousness, energy, destiny, purpose, and spiritual transformation. But there comes a point where gathering information becomes easier than actually changing your life. You can understand everything about awakening and still avoid the conversation you know you need to have. You can study signs while ignoring an obvious truth. You can ask for guidance while secretly hoping the answer will allow you to remain exactly where you are. And this is where the message becomes uncomfortable, because perhaps humanity does not suffer from a shortage of answers. Perhaps we suffer from a shortage of courage to act on what we already know. And underneath that hesitation is something Cannon repeatedly addressed in her work: fear. But fear does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it sounds like, "I'm just waiting for the right time." Sometimes it becomes another request for a sign. You tell yourself that when the right coincidence appears, you will move. When you feel completely certain, you will change. When life becomes easier, you will finally become the person you know you could be. But what if that certainty never arrives? What if fear has learned how to disguise itself as spiritual caution? Think about how easily this happens. You know a relationship has become unhealthy, but you wait for another sign. You know a habit is slowly draining you, but you tell yourself tomorrow will be different. You know you are constantly becoming smaller to keep someone else comfortable, yet you continue asking whether you should finally be yourself. At some point, the question is no longer, "What is the universe trying to tell me?" The question becomes, "What am I afraid will happen if I finally listen?" And that takes us directly into one of the deepest themes connected with Cannon's work: identity. Within her spiritual worldview, the personality you carry through everyday life is not the whole of you. Your name is not the whole of you. Your history is not the whole of you. Your failures, wounds, fears, and the roles other people gave you are not necessarily the deepest level of who you are. In that framework, physical life involves forgetting a larger spiritual identity and slowly remembering it again. You do not have to accept reincarnation literally to recognize the human truth inside that idea, because we forget ourselves all the time. Something fails, and instead of saying, "That failed," you begin saying, "I am a failure." Someone rejects you, And instead of experiencing rejection as one painful event, something inside begins whispering, "I am unwanted." Fear appears, and instead of saying, "I feel afraid," you begin living as though fear has revealed the truth about who you are. That is how experiences become identities. And once an identity becomes familiar, we begin protecting it. Even painful identities, even the ones we say we want to escape. Because familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. That may be one of the strangest parts of transformation. You can genuinely want a new life, while another part of you desperately tries to preserve the old one. You want peace, but you keep feeding the resentment. You want freedom, but you refuse to release control. You want to live honestly, but you still shape yourself around other people's approval. You want change, but only if change can guarantee that nothing uncomfortable will happen. And real change cannot make that promise. That is why the deeper question is not simply, who was I before this life? It is much more immediate. Who am I continuing to pretend to be because I am afraid of what happens when I stop? And once you see the question that way, the idea of Cannon's famous shift begins to look different. Many people attracted to her later teachings focus on the idea of humanity moving into a new level of awareness, sometimes described through the language of a new earth. It is easy to imagine that as an external event, a dramatic separation, a sudden planetary transformation, one moment when everything changes. But consider another possibility. What if a new world would mean very little if you entered it carrying the same consciousness? Imagine waking tomorrow in the most beautiful reality possible, while carrying the same resentment, jealousy, fear, need for approval, and old wounds. How long before you begin recreating the same inner world? The surroundings would be different, but you would still be carrying the old earth inside you. That changes the meaning of the shift. Maybe the question is not only where humanity is going, maybe it is what humanity is taking with it. Fear or awareness, resentment or release, automatic reaction or conscious choice. And suddenly, the great spiritual transformation becomes much more personal. You do not have to wait for the sky to change before that shift begins. It can happen in a room where nobody is watching. When you finally tell the truth you have avoided. When you set the boundary you kept postponing. When someone hurts you and you refuse to let that wound control the next 10 years of your life. When fear appears and you listen to it without automatically obeying it. Nothing dramatic happens in the sky. No announcement is made. But inside you, something has changed. And this may be the part people miss when they wait for transformation as a future event. One day. One day I will be ready. One day I will stop being afraid. One day life will become easier. One day I will receive the sign. One day I will finally begin. But years can disappear inside those two words, because one day allows you to love the idea of transformation without facing the cost of transformation. Potential is comfortable. Potential never has to risk rejection. Potential never has to say no. Potential never has to walk away. Potential never has to become real. Reality does. And sometimes the sign you keep requesting is simply the decision you already know you need to make. But there is an important distinction here. Fear itself is not evil. Fear protects us. It warns us when something is dangerous. It can slow us down when caution is necessary. It is part of being human. The problem begins when fear stops giving information and starts giving orders. There is a difference between saying, "I am feeling fear," and saying, "Because I feel fear, I must not move." One recognizes an emotion, the other makes that emotion your authority. And once fear becomes your authority, it starts quietly designing your life. It decides which opportunities you reject, which conversations you avoid, which truths you hide, which people you remain around, how much of yourself you are willing to show, and eventually, who you believe you are allowed to become. This battle rarely looks dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it is just a phone call you do not make, a boundary you almost set, a truth that reaches your lips and disappears, an opportunity you reject because failure would hurt, or a dream you keep describing but never begin. Nothing visible happens, But fear has made another decision. And this is where the central message finally comes into focus. Perhaps humanity's great transition is not simply an event that comes to rescue people from the lives they created. Perhaps it begins when consciousness stops allowing fear to create those lives in the first place. The planets do not have to rearrange first. The world does not have to become perfect. You do not have to wake up tomorrow without insecurity, uncertainty, or pain. The shift begins when the old reaction appears and you do something different. Someone criticizes you, and instead of collapsing into the old identity, you remain grounded. A painful memory returns, but you refuse to let yesterday write tomorrow. Fear tells you to stay silent, yet you calmly speak. The need for approval appears, but for once, you do not abandon yourself to satisfy it. That is not as spectacular as a cosmic prediction, but it may be far more difficult because it asks something from you. And if that is true, another uncomfortable idea follows. Eventually, even the teacher has to be released. A genuine spiritual teacher should ultimately help you become less dependent on outside authority. Otherwise, the search never really ends. You simply replace one dependency with another. You begin asking, what would Dolores say? What would another teacher do? What does this prediction mean for me? What does someone else think my next step should be? Those questions can help temporarily, but if Cannon's deeper message was about reconnecting with an inner level of awareness, then eventually the question has to change. What happens when nobody else answers for me? What becomes clear when the noise stops? That does not mean rejecting teachers, books, meditation, or spiritual ideas. They can be valuable, but their healthiest purpose is to point. A mirror helps you recognize your own face. You do not spend the rest of your life believing your face exists inside the mirror. In the same way, perhaps the purpose of spiritual teaching is not to make you stare forever at the teacher. It is to help you recognize something you eventually have to live for yourself. And that is where silence becomes important, because most of us are almost never truly silent. The room can be quiet while the mind is screaming. Old conversations repeat. Future problems are rehearsed. You imagine what someone thinks about you. You replay what you should have said. You predict what might go wrong. You reach for your phone. You fill every empty space. And underneath all that noise may be something you have been avoiding for months or even years. Stillness does not guarantee a supernatural answer. It does something simpler. It gives you enough distance to notice what is actually happening inside you. You begin seeing which thoughts come from panic, which desires come from comparison, which decisions are being driven by the need for approval, which fears are protecting you from real danger, and which fears are merely protecting an identity that has become too small. That difference matters, because a fearful thought often feels urgent. It pushes. It wants an answer now. It demands certainty. A deeper recognition may feel very different. Quiet, persistent, almost inconveniently clear. You may have tried to ignore it, but it keeps returning. This relationship is hurting me. This habit has to stop. I need to apologize. I need to begin. I need to let this go. I cannot keep pretending. You do not have to call that a message from another dimension. You do not even have to understand exactly where it comes from. The important question is, what happens when you finally stop drowning it out? And this is also where a reasonable skeptical view belongs. Cannon's beliefs about reincarnation, alternate realities, past life experiences, and an expansive subconscious belong to a metaphysical framework. They are not established scientific facts. Someone skeptical of her conclusions can interpret hypnotic experiences as symbolic narratives, imagination, emotional associations, or memory-like experiences created by the mind. But even then, one powerful question survives. What does the experience produce in your life? Does it make you more honest, more compassionate, more responsible, more aware of your own patterns? Or does it make you more frightened, dependent, and obsessed with receiving the next answer? Because spiritual knowledge can become another form of avoidance. You can talk about energy and still be cruel. You can speak about awakening while being controlled by jealousy. You can study higher consciousness while needing everyone around you to approve of you. You can memorize every spiritual concept and still allow fear to make the important decisions. That may be the quieter warning inside this entire message. You can become fascinated with awakening without ever waking up. You can study transformation without transforming. You can spend years looking for hidden knowledge, while the most important truth is sitting inside your ordinary behavior. And life eventually exposes the difference. Not when everything is calm, but when pressure arrives, when someone rejects you, when your plans fail, when you are misunderstood, when the old wound gets touched. That is when you discover whether your beliefs changed you or simply gave you new words. And maybe that points towards something important about the future as well. Perhaps the next meaningful shift in spiritual culture will not be another explosion of predictions and dramatic claims. Maybe people will eventually become exhausted from constantly giving their inner authority away to personalities, algorithms, signs, predictions, and endless content telling them what is about to happen and how they should feel about it. Because the louder the outside world becomes, the more valuable discernment becomes. And discernment is not blindly trusting every feeling. It is not rejecting evidence because something feels spiritual. It is being able to separate fear from real danger, desire from truth, impulse from conscience, possibility from evidence, and genuine inner clarity from the desperate need to hear what you want to hear. A person with that kind of awareness does not become superhuman. They do not suddenly know the future. Fear does not disappear. But something important changes. Fear can appear without becoming obedience. A prediction can be heard without becoming destiny. A teacher can be respected without controlling every decision. A painful past can be remembered without being allowed to choose the future. And perhaps that is one of the deepest ways to understand the shift. Not humanity escaping this world, but humanity becoming more conscious while living inside it. After all the extraordinary ideas connected with Dolores Cannon, past lives, consciousness, death, other realities, the higher self, the message eventually becomes surprisingly simple. Do not spend your entire life waiting for reality to change before you give yourself permission to change. Because perhaps the revelation people keep searching for is not hidden in another world. Perhaps the real secret has been sitting much closer. Fear will still speak. The question is whether you continue letting it choose. And that leads directly to the message you should carry with you when this video ends. Dolores Cannon spent her life exploring what may exist beyond this physical reality. But perhaps the hidden message behind all of it is much simpler. The biggest shift may not begin around you. It may begin with what you finally stop allowing to control you. So take this message with you. Do not let fear make every important decision for your life. Stop waiting endlessly for signs, predictions, or someone else's permission. Give yourself a few quiet minutes. Notice what you already know needs to change, and take one small step toward it. And if this message truly connected with you, write in the comments, "I will not let fear control me anymore." Let that be your personal reminder, not a promise to never feel fear, but a decision to stop letting fear choose everything for you. And if you want more videos about Dolores Cannon, consciousness, hidden spiritual meanings, and the mysteries that make us question what we think we know, subscribe to the channel. Maybe that was the secret message all along. The awakening you are waiting for may begin with the decision you make next.